Good morning, everyone. It's unbelievable to see so many people looking for something to do on a bank holiday Monday. Look at that. But seriously, if you have any ideas of what we should do as a family this afternoon, please do let us know. I'm not sure if it's raining, if the sun's shining, but we're always looking for some exciting, nice things to do together as a family. It is time for everyone to go back to school. I'd just like to say it's time. But we're going to enjoy today together as well. It's really so wonderful to see so many of you. We have a lovely WhatsApp group. So if anyone's not on that, if you let me know afterwards, you can give me your number and I'll add you to it. And I know that not everyone's able to come normally on a Monday morning. So those of you who came specially, even though Monday morning 9:30 is normally not the best time for you, an extra special warm welcome to you. I know there are some people who haven't been able to come in person, but have been listening to our talks on YouTube, which is amazing. And some of them aren't part of this community and some of them aren't even in this country. So we're very slowly, it feels quite overwhelming, but it is spreading. I think a lot of you were with us yesterday in Shul. I know not everyone was, but those of you who were, I wanted to share. So it's not very usual that I give the sermon. And I think I said to Elchanan, I think this is the third time that I've done it on the 8th day of Pesach, which 3 times is called a chazaka, which means I might be stuck with that slot for a while now, I think, but you never know. But it was so lovely. I got such wonderful feedback. And one of my boys said to me, Mum, you know, you spoke for 22 minutes, which was the best feedback. I was like, oops. So yeah, I did speak for a while once I got going. But what's been amazing is to hear people sharing about the story that I shared at the end. And it's funny because I knew it was kind of getting late and should I share the story? And it was so powerful. But what was interesting for me as well is it was kind of either cooking for Yom Tov or coming to Shul and writing up notes for the sermon. So cooking for Yom Tov had to win. So I hadn't written notes, but I'd kind of gathered some ideas together. And one of them was the story that I shared, which was from a really wonderful book called The Little Book for Big Worries by Rabbi Y.Y. Rubenstein, dealing with serious illness. And those of you who know Rabbi Y.Y., his wife unfortunately passed away from cancer. So he's really coming from a very personal place, but it's quite a powerful book that he shares lots of different ideas. And I was flicking through it, and the chapter that I took the story from was talking about why really bad things happen to really good people, which, you know, is kind of one of those questions that we're going to keep coming back to again and again and again. And that's where we have that story about the boats. But what was amazing for me is to hear, so I read it on Yom Tov, which meant I couldn't fact check. And I knew I don't like sharing a story unless I know for sure, but obviously like Rabbi YY's sharing something, but I didn't know if he was sharing it as kind of something that could have happened or something that really happened. And then when I looked it up, actually this morning I found there was an article in The Guardian about it. Maybe not all my facts were perfect, but that happens sometimes when you share a story. But even more impressive than that is I got this WhatsApp message this morning. Good morning. I hope you finished Pesach well. I just wanted to let you know that yesterday when we sat down for lunch, I was telling our son, who was outside on security, about your story and the story of the ship to Australia. Then he and my husband told me that when they were in Australia, they walked into a museum, not Jewish, and there was a whole exhibition about the story. They said the exhibition was brilliant, and he picked up a booklet which is mainly about the exhibition rather than the ship. Please do share. They love the museum, and all you said was explained in the museum. There was an exhibition in the State Library of Sydney, and she shared with me some pictures from this booklet that they picked up all about. So obviously the story did happen. And then Kathy's just shared with us as well, which is amazing, is that Michelle Lassman in the office, her grandfather was on the ship. So I'm sure there's other people as well. You shared as well that Alan, that there's people who were on that ship, which is just amazing how the story of the ship spread. So will you share with us what you told me about?
He said a very, very good friend of ours, Paul's cousin. I always was told that his father was on the ship that went to Australia, was on the Dunera, and he wrote a book about it. There was a book about it, which I think we've seen sometime. And then I went on the Dunera, but not to Australia, only to Leningrad, because they converted it into a troop ship. And they sent a load of school kids over to Leningrad. Came back.
What was that?
To fight on the troop ship.
Yeah, Uncle Tom.
Our father's sister, but he got out of Germany. So he was imprisoned in Dachau, and he was released from Dachau, and he managed to get to England and was in the camp on the Kent coast. And my aunt was helping out there. That's how she met him. Never spoken. Never, not to him.
So I think for me as well, why the story kind of resonated was there's the story that's been passed on in my family. And we always say Pesach is all about the stories and our history and our stories. My grandmother was a very tough German woman, and she was quite young when she came over to this country, and she managed to get her parents to come over as well. But then when war broke out, they were taking any German males and putting them on the Isle of Man, and she literally lay across the door and wouldn't let them take her father. So obviously they weren't treated well at all. But when I heard about this story about the ship, it's thinking like what could have happened to our family. But you know, thankfully she was able to keep him at home because he was an elderly man by that point. But I think that to me, the idea of people going through an experience, and I know not everyone was there yesterday, so the idea was on this Dinero ship that the people on the ship threw over all their possessions, and at that point, if you think all these poor German Jews who'd suffered so much, they must think that their life had just, you know, how could it possibly get any worse? This is just the most terrible thing that happened. And I think that there's so many times in our lives when we feel that sense of just despair, like this is just the worst thing ever. And very rarely do we get a chance to kind of go back and look at what did happen and see like actually what I thought was terrible was actually something that saved me. And that's what happened in this case. And I think what's amazing about this story is if they wouldn't have found the log for the U-boat, they would never have known that actually because all the papers were thrown overboard and they saw German writing, they didn't attack the ship and they escorted it all the way to Australia. It just blows your mind. So again, I know not everyone was there and I'm not going through the story in detail, but just to understand this idea that there are times where we just don't see that other side of the coin. We just don't see the hidden parts. That's what kind of God keeps those hidden parts, and we can't always see them. But on those very rare occasions when you do find out, you know, the other side of the story, and that's actually you know, we read on Pesach about the splitting of the sea. Obviously, that's on the 7th day of Pesach, and this idea that the Jewish people got to a point where they could look back and sing, and they could look back and say, this was all such a wonderful thing that happened. You know, thank God, God saved us, everything's wonderful. But think about like a few minutes before that, or however long it took to cross the sea, when they're standing at the sea and the Egyptians are behind them and they've survived, they're the survivors. They've gone through hell and back and they went through the plague and they got out. And then the enemies are coming to attack them again. So just put your mind in the head of one of those Jewish people standing there at the sea with the Egyptians behind you. There's mountains on both sides and there's sea in front of you. And you don't know anything about splitting seas. Don't be ridiculous. Seas don't split. What's going to happen to you? You've gone through so much suffering and that's where you're stuck. And then there was one brave soul called Nachshon ben Aminadav who went into the water. And he kept going and going. And, you know, he said, God's going to split the sea. And can you imagine if you were there at the time, you'd be, you were sure going to get him out. Someone rescue him. It was this crazy man walking into the water. And then the sea did split. But what's interesting is at that point, Moshe turns to God and he starts praying. And Hashem says to him, enough with your davening. Go and do something. Go and lead the Jewish people. Which is like a funny thing to think about because we all think like, oh, you should daven and daven. You should daven and daven and daven, of course. But sometimes you've got to do something. And that was at the point where Nachshon did. He walked into the water. So there's lots of ideas about faith. Yes, Diane.
Before that happened, it's like, what, you know, it's really seen a river now, but enormous sea. I mean, it's never looked at.
Yeah.
Terrifying.
Yeah. I heard someone describing, Francis, were you saying about, yeah, you were saying yesterday about the boys when they went on the plane, they lived in the middle of Germany. They'd never seen water like that. And it must be petrifying if you don't understand. I mean, forget being on a plane that you don't understand. You know, the experience of, right, like you say, seeing the sea, like it's frightening, the sea. And to be told, go into the sea or stay there and get killed by the people who've been, you know, oppressing you for hundreds of years. So a lot to think about really today. Today's actually, Kathy has yahrzeit for her father, for his 51st yahrzeit. His Hebrew name was Yitzchak ben Nassan HaKohen. So our learning, and also Kathy found some chametz biscuits, which is amazing. Who knew? So we couldn't get milk together for today. Sorry about that, but we did manage to find. Yeah, I know. I just didn't think about it, but we did manage to find some chametz biscuits. So please God, our learning should be in his memory. And anyone who wants to sponsor for someone's yahrzeit, in someone's memory, for a special occasion, for a special birthday, anything, for a regular birthday, anniversary, anything like that. It's been really lovely to have different people sponsoring our learning together each time, and an extra bonus to have some biscuits today. So thank you. So this idea of coming to the sea and being able to sing, I shared this, I think last year. Was it Stella? Was it last year when I? Were you not here on Pesach? When was that?
Oh, sorry.
Was it on Pesach or no? You were here on Pesach. I can't remember. Okay, so it must have been maybe Hanukkah time. But this is an amazing book that Stella shared with me, and it's based on the same idea of the Jewish people coming through the sea and singing, which we say Az Yashir. This is called Az Nashir, which is the feminine, and it's a group of women who've put together, since October the 7th, they've put together their prayers for their time of needs. And I know I've shared some of these ideas together, but I think what's amazing about it is it's inspired by Miriam. And Miriam, you know, again, is so connected to Pesach, this idea that the Jewish people had suffered for so long. And yet, when the Jewish women left Egypt, she encouraged them to take with their timbrels. So apparently a timbrel is a tambourine without the drum part. Did we know this? Yeah, so I learned something there. The tambourine is obviously you can bang it and shake it at the same time. The timbrel is just the shaking part, but they came out with timbrels. So when it says at the time of the sea, it says that the men danced and they were led in song, and then women, and Miriam led the women in song and dance. And the additional thing the women had was these timbrels. So if you were packing up after hundreds of years in slavery and oppression, and you had to decide, I mean, I'm just thinking about when we went on a trip on Chol HaMoed and how long it took us, seriously, to pack up the car. So Elchanan had to be somewhere in the morning. He took his mum to the airport, and then when he came back, he's got an electric car. And I said to him afterwards when we'd left, I said, how comes you didn't charge your car? So he said, because I thought we'd go 2 minutes later. I was like, there's no going 2 minutes later. You know, everyone had to get their stuff and pack up their sandwiches, and especially on Pesach, it's like a whole, you know what it's like till you get out the house, right? I'm sure everyone can. So it just did make me laugh. Like, what was he thinking? He was going to come home and leave 2 minutes later. We're all just ready to go. But if you think what it was like that they were leaving, out of all the things you're going to leave, really, you're going to take with your musical instruments. But and the reason behind it was because she knew that they were going to get to a point where it's just going to be so obvious that we're going to need to celebrate. Like, that's just amazing. That level of faith, to live with that, is just an amazing thing. And Miriam really was that person who lived with faith. But I think why this is inspiring is because we're not at the end of the story. You know, we spoke about this idea when the boat came over. Now, looking back on history, we're at the end of the story. You can look back and see, oh, it all made sense, right? Even though they threw over all their things overboard, but it was to say it saved their life. That makes sense. We're nowhere near that in terms of our story and our history, and especially the people who are writing this, who are, you know, living in Israel. Many of them have undergone their own loss. They're going through really challenging times, and yet they're already finding things to pray and finding things to sing. And they called it, after this idea of Az Nashir, then we're going to sing. We're going to find a reason to celebrate. And I think what's amazing is we've seen like the Nova kind of slogan has become, what is it that they say? We will dance again, right? We will dance again. You're not going to stop us dancing. We're Jewish people. You know, this week we've got Yom HaShoah, and next week we've got Yom HaZikaron and Yom HaAtzmaut, and we're going to dance. And it's the first year when we were thinking about really we're going to dance on Yom HaAtzmaut, but it felt like we need to almost dance more, right? We need to celebrate even more because we are still here. And the more they try to destroy us, the more, right? In every generation, we just read at Seder night, in every generation they try to destroy us. The more they try to destroy us, the more we're going to celebrate. Yes. No, I was trying to find it. Will you find it for me, Stella? Then I'll read it out. Thank you. I couldn't see the place section. I know you said to me, I did look yesterday. Thank you, Stella. Okay. I'm going to read out the Dayenu prayer, and then you can all get a feel for what it's like. Okay, I wanted to share this, which is someone in our group shared with me as well. There's a gorgeous Eliyahu cup. So we were talking about the idea of tradition. And this is, hi, I just wanted to thank you for the Emunah talk yesterday. I'm really enjoying the learning. I wanted to share with you that when you spoke about Pesach and the traditions we keep, it made me think of our Elijah cup. My sister and I share the cup. It has been passed down from our great-grandparents in Prussia to our grandparents in Poland, and then our father to us. It's very precious, and we use it at our seders and think of the generations. Wishing you and the family a wonderful Pesach. How many people have something that they use specifically on Pesach that's been passed down through the generations? Yeah.
We have a glass that my aunt, when she came back from Auschwitz, she went home to the village where my mother grew up. They lived in a house together, and she found 3 things that remained from my grandparents. One was a glass, one was a cup and saucer, glass cup and saucer, and the other was a family photo. The photo was used by somebody to fill in a broken window, and she brought that back to my mother, and the glass, and the glass that we have, it must be, well, it was my grandparents, so well over 100 years old, and we use it as Elijah's cup.
Yeah.
And the cup and saucer we use, we put it on the Seder plate, we salt water in it, and it comes out every year wherever we have Seder. So
amazing. That's really like those traditions. There's something specifically about Pesach, that tradition, that is our time for sharing tradition. I wasn't able to get the letter from the person who wrote it just because Yom Tov finished quite late, and then we decided to be clever, or I'll take responsibility. I decided to be clever this year, and someone had told me that if you put sticky back plastic on your countertops, like the marble effect one, it's a really good way to cover your counters for Pesach. And I really preferred it because I don't love the whole silver foil look on the kitchen, I have to be honest. So it was a really good idea till last night when we had to try to take it off. So apparently with a hairdryer it does come off, so we did manage, but yeah, it took a little bit longer than I was anticipating. But anyway, not yesterday at the chocolate Seder, so on Shabbat, when I came to Shul, there was one of our young families, and the mother was explaining to me that they'd done Seder. The first night they'd had some relatives over, and the second night was just the 4 of them, so a very young, children-orientated Seder night. But what she said was the first night was some of the relatives who were coming didn't really appreciate the importance of Seder. I'm sure people know what that feels like. It's really difficult when you have someone at the table who doesn't want to be there. And she decided, she made a speech at the start of the Seder, and I will try and get the wording because I'd love to share it with everyone. But she just told me that she really read out about why this is so important. And I think like that's amazing. You know, sometimes, I don't know, I think sometimes we don't mean to be, but we can be kind of a bit judgmental of the next generation. And I think when you hear that, things like that, you just think like, that's amazing that they care. But why do they care? Because we've given them that tradition. We've passed on to them the fact that this is important. And Pesach really is all, like we've been saying the whole way through, but Pesach really is all about that Emunah, that sharing that faith. So I will try and get that script for you for next time to be able to share it, because I thought that was very powerful. Okay, the last thing that I wanted to share with you in terms of different different bits that I'd seen was I saw this lovely quote that I thought was really powerful. And I wanted to share it with you. So it's in Hebrew and English. Tefillah hi lahavi et hada'agot shelcha el Hashem. Prayer is bringing your worries to Hashem. I thought that's a really nice way of looking at prayer, right? The idea of, we talk about the idea like send your woes to God, send them to him. That's what prayer does. When we stand and we pray, whatever it is that we're worried about and whatever it is that we're praying for, we're sending them to God. Emunah hi lahash'irotam sham. Faith is leaving them there. And I thought that's such a clever way of understanding what faith is. You know, if we really truly understand that God is capable of anything, and I know that that's a hard thing to really internalize, even if we can say it, to know that you can send your woes to God, but then leave them there with him. You know, it makes me think of this idea of, there was like an old parable or Hasidic tale that they often tell about this idea of a man gets on a wagon and he's schlepping his suitcases with, and he's standing in the wagon and he's carrying his suitcases, and they say to him like, why are you carrying your suitcases? You're on the wagon, you're on the train, right? Why are you still schlepping your suitcases? Says, oh, it's too heavy for the horse. It's not fair if I put my luggage down. So this poor man standing there carrying his case. Don't we sometimes do that? Don't we sometimes do that? Don't we sometimes think to ourselves, okay, I've got to hold on to this stuff. I can't let it go. But it's people who really live with this true depth of faith, this true depth of Emunah, this true depth of understanding that, like, you can send it to God. You know, give it to God. Let him be the one to share it. Stella, did you find the prayer? Is it in a different book? That's what. Okay. So that's so weird. Yeah, because I know you said about a pace, I think. Anyway, okay, I'll continue rambling, and then you'll interrupt me as soon as you find it. Okay, the next thing that I wanted to show, this is like show and tell today a little bit. The next thing that I wanted to tell you was, as Yom Tov was, yesterday afternoon, I was just trying to figure out where the Haggadahs were going to go and looking at the bookshelves, and I came across this book that I bought. I bought it when I was in America last time, so sometime last year, and it's called The Tale of a Niggun by Elie Wiesel. Has anyone heard of it? Have you? You have heard of it? Okay, amazing. So I'd never read it, and I saw it yesterday, and I thought, oh, that's interesting, and it's short, so I can read something that's not too long. It was kind of the end of Yom Tov. My brain wasn't going to digest anything too. I'm going to just read you the back of it. This is Elie Wiesel's heartbreaking narrative poem about history, immortality, and the power of song, accompanied by magnificent full-color illustrations by award-winning artist Mark Podwell, based on an actual event that occurred during World War II. And those of you who came with us to Poland, or even who know Mala, and what's interesting is it says that it's based, so it's a story, but it's based around what happened during the war in European ghettos, most notably in two towns in central Poland, Zduńska Wola and Piotrków. So I thought that was, because Piotrków, if any of you who came with us, Marla's from Piotrków, as is actually Rabbi Lau, the former chief rabbi of Israel. So Piotrków is kind of one of those places that whenever you see it, you go, oh, Piotrków. We went there and we saw the Shul, and it's a very powerful setting. Okay. So it's the evening before the holiday of Purim, and the Nazis have given the ghetto leaders 24 hours to turn over 10 Jews to be hanged to avenge the deaths of the 10 sons of Haman, the villain of the Purim story, which celebrates the triumph of the Jews of Persia over potential genocide some 2,400 years ago. If the leaders refuse, the entire ghetto will be liquidated. Terrified, they go to the ghetto's rabbi for advice. He tells them to return the next morning. Over the course of the night, the rabbi calls up the spirits of legendary rabbis from centuries past for advice on what to do, but no one can give him a satisfactory answer. The 18th century mystic and founder of Hasidism, the Baal Shem Tov, tries to intercede with God by singing a niggun, a wordless, joyful melody with the power to break the chains of evil. The next evening, when no volunteers step forward, The ghetto's residents are informed that in an hour they will all be killed. As the minutes tick by, the ghetto's rabbi teaches his assembled community the song that the Baal Shem Tov had sung the night before. And then the voices of these men, women, and children soar to the heavens. How can the heavens not hear? Obviously, we're going now. It's a strange transition what happens. You finish Pesach and we're going straight into Yom HaShoah this week. But it felt like there's something quite powerful there. But I think for me as well, reading about how this community rabbi who could easily have been, transport this community a while back. And you say, how could you possibly choose 10 people? It's not what we do, right? We don't do that as Jews. We won't hand over 10 people, even though it meant that everyone would be killed. And there were different ways of arguing it. One, the straight halacha is fine, so you just give over 10 people. Interestingly, one of the rabbis that they spoke to, the Vilna Gaon, he said, I'll give you a list of 10. And he said, Eliyahu of Vilna, Eliyahu, he gave his name in 10 different variations. His answer was kind of, you can't give to anyone else, but I will represent the Jewish people, which obviously couldn't happen. He wasn't alive then, but it's this idea. But I think the reason this was so powerful for me was because talking through the traditions and knowing that we have history to base things upon, there's a certain comfort in that. So you watch this, and I would recommend it to read this poem. But this idea of going back to generations past to look for guidance is something that has given me a lot of strength and comfort, actually. And I think that I've shared here before, but with Johnny Daniels, who please God is going to be coming to the community in a few weeks' time. But one of the things he said is that look at history. In the end, right, this idea of when you look back, in the end, it's going to be okay. And even though there's so much of what's going on right now that just doesn't feel okay, I'm sure as many of you after Yom Tov, you check your phone and you're just hoping and praying there's going to be something amazing that's going to show up on the news, and it doesn't. And this sense of you just desperately, we're all thinking of those 59. It's just 59 more. Come on, let's just get them all home. That sense of we just desperately want it. But I think holding on to this idea that, the first rabbi that the first stage that this rabbi goes to is the Rambam. The Rambam lived through such terrible times. It's happened again and again and again through our history, but yet we're still here. And as a whole, we're going to be okay, even though it feels really difficult. And I think, the Holocaust is something that's so, for all of us, it's something that's so much a part of us. But I think especially for people who are, first generation, second generation, it's third generation, it's part of who we are in such a strong way. But knowing that our people have gone through so many things, and yet the end story is going to be something good. The end story, we're going to be able to look back and see everything's going to be okay in the end, even if it doesn't feel like it right now. So like I said, I found that story very powerful. Fellas found the Diana.
Different section.
Yeah, it wasn't the paper.
No, there wasn't.
Okay. A song of praise upon being delivered from the missiles of our enemies. So this was the 6th of Nisan, 5784. So it's last year. I'm assuming it's when the missiles from Iran. Do you remember that actually? It was just before Pesach that they were all kind of getting ready for Pesach, and then suddenly they had to run into and at that time, I mean, it didn't make sense that everyone was going to be okay. It's like, they're sending all these missiles to the Jewish people. What's going to happen? So this is Yael Ziegler. She wrote it in Hebrew, but I'm going to read the English. I'm going to actually read the first line in Hebrew, just so you can hear it's the same idea as what our Dayan is. Ilu hotzianu misreifas hashoah velo natan lanu medina dayenu. How much favor has the Eternal One bestowed upon us? If he had rescued us from the flames of the Shoah and not granted us a state, it would have been enough for us. Dayenu. If he had granted us a state, but not fought our wars for us, Dayenu. If he had fought our wars for us and not gathered in our exiles, Dayenu. If he had gathered in our exiles but not reunited Jerusalem, Dayenu. I've got like this. If he had reunited Jerusalem but not expanded our dwelling places, Dayenu. If he had expanded our dwelling places and transformed the desert into a lake of water, Dayenu. If he had transformed the desert into a lake of water and not strengthened your sons and daughters to be scholars of Hashem, Dayenu. If he had strengthened your sons and daughters to be scholars of Hashem and not fulfilled Zechariah's prophecy, as told by Rabbi Akiva, Dayenu. If he had fulfilled Zechariah's prophecy and not brought out treasures from its seas, Dayenu. If he had brought us out treasures from the sea and not rescued us from the hands of our enemies who were poised to end us, Dayenu. If he had rescued us from the hands of our enemies who were poised to end us and not given us heroic soldiers, swifter than eagles and mightier than lions, Dayenu. If he had not given us heroic soldiers, swifter than eagles and mightier than lions, and not yet granted us complete redemption, it would have been enough, Dayenu. So just like on Seder night, we say Dayenu, but it's not that we don't really mean it, right? We know that we needed to get to the end of the story. So I think that's what's so powerful here, is that it's every step that Hashem's done for us is so amazing. And each one of them, Dayenu, as in like we could spend our whole life just talking about, you know, if you think about the miracles of the wars of Israel, I know that they say in military colleges, they don't teach about the Israeli wars because they just don't make any sense. It's completely illogical. It doesn't make sense how this small country can fight against its surrounding countries and exist. It's completely illogical, isn't it? There's nothing about Israel that makes sense. And even like, you know, when we look back, and I know there's so much challenge around October the 7th and anger and so much of that, you know, why it should have happened and the human side of things. You know, I know we've spoken about why people took for granted Hamas, but there's also so many parts of what would have happened if Hamas and Hezbollah would have attacked at the same time. And, you know, if we think about this Dayenu, like there's so much to be grateful for. But when we say the last line in here is that like the complete redemption, that is really, we need that. We need an everlasting peace. You know, like I spoke about, but in the Haftarah, this idea of the wolf and the lamb lying together. It's, you know, think really about it. Think about a world where we can exist with our enemies and we won't hate each other. And I think what's so hard is that so many of the people, you know, who would live down south and who were taken as hostages or killed on October 7th, they really believed in that. They really, really believed in a world where we can coexist in peace, right? That's a lot of the reason why a lot of them were living there. They really believed in this idea of working and giving more to each other so that there'll be peace. And the Haftarah yesterday was telling us there will be a time where there will be peace, where we will be able to live together, where we will be able to coexist. Thank you very much, Sarah. That's beautiful. It's really amazing. There's like prayers for every situation. It's I think what's beautiful, you know, the more you learn our Siddur and the more you understand prayers, the more you can connect to them. But I think what's so special about this is modern day, very learned people, but modern day people who've put together prayers that really talk to where we're holding. Like they really, really do, which is a very powerful thing. And actually it's happened through generations. If anyone's seen the Anani booklet, it's not the Siddur, but it's a booklet of prayers that people say almost in like language that speaks a bit more to talking from your heart, because there's two types of prayer. There's the prayer of reading the set text, and then there's the prayer of talking from your heart. And everyone can do the prayer of talking from your heart, but sometimes when you've got some beautifully written prayers from people who've shared them with us like this, it just helps you talk from your heart a little bit more.
What's the title again?
Az Nashir, we will sing again. Shvili is the author. Okay. So I want to go back, and for some of us, I know that we're gonna jump around a little bit, but for the end of the talk today, I want to just go back to this idea that we spoke about of asking questions and when we know and what we know based upon. So the first, really what we're going to talk about is the joy and beauty of asking questions. But I just want to share again the idea we spoke about, this idea that sometimes we know things because we've looked into it and we've discovered it ourselves. And that's, you know, we spoke about this idea of Elokeinu is my God. I've done the research, I've looked into things, I have this relationship, I have this understanding. And sometimes it's Elokei Avosenu, which is the God of my fathers. The reason that I do it is tradition. And both of those concepts we'll look into more as we go through our topics together. But those are the kind of the two main ways of understanding where faith can come from. Either it's because I've come to this understanding on my own, or it's because I have this really strong rooted tradition. But what it's not saying is I just do it because I just do it and I don't really think about it. Right? Because then you would just do whatever you do because you were born into whatever family you were born into, and it doesn't really have that that same, you know, you're just doing it just because. That's not really helpful. So it's a little bit like if it would be snowing outside. There's two ways that you can know it's snowing outside. The one way you can know it's snowing outside is because someone you trust and know has been outside and comes in and tells you it's snowing outside. Now, if you just believe anyone, you're a fool. If you believe someone who is someone that's trustworthy, and you now, because they've told you, you know it's snowing, that's a sensible way of being, right? You're allowed to believe someone who's a trustworthy person. And that's what Pesach's all about. It's all about the reason that we do is because our parents and our grandparents, our great, who go all the way originally back to that first generation who were in Egypt. So that's why we do and why we know. And that's that idea of tradition, but not just like the tradition, because I don't know, it's tradition, right? Which is kind of the Tevye. Who knows? It's tradition. No, it's tradition. It's tradition based on this is something that we've always done. Or the other idea is, how do you know it's snowing? Not because someone told you. How else can you know it's snowing outside? You're outside. It's snowing, right? My kids always ask me, they're like, Mummy, can you check the weather? I'm like, can I have your phone? I need to check the weather. Like, you could go outside, it might tell you what the weather is, you know. Is it raining? There is an interesting way of knowing if it's raining that doesn't involve technology, right? It's quite simple. It's called stepping outside. So, but yeah, that's exactly, go outside, see if it's snowing. If it's snowing, it's snowing. So we're going to do some work in future sessions together to look at both of those ideas separately, to look at the idea of, you know, it's like the two schools of thought, the tradition school of thought and the knowledge school of thought. But even if we take a step back from that, and something that we had shared before, the idea of asking questions, what's interesting with those two schools of thought is, as good as they are, if you have a question, it doesn't necessarily answer them. So you can know it's snowing because you have tradition, and you can know it's snowing because you've gone outside and you've seen it. But what if you've got a question about how heavily it's snowing? So, okay, if you've gone outside, you can ask the question. What we're saying is it's this idea of asking questions isn't just because either you have tradition or you have knowledge, or you might just be asking the questions, but actually asking those questions is a really important place to be in as well. And that's where we connected it with the idea of Manishtana. We connected it with the idea of just ask. You know, someone shared from this group, actually, someone shared that some of the questions and discussions she's been having with her young adult son about faith. And I just think it's amazing. Like, it's, you know, I said he's going to become a rabbi one day, but it's like when you see these questions, we shouldn't be scared off, like, oh my gosh, he doesn't believe. It's okay. Ask the questions. The questions are fascinating. So Rabbi Y.Y. Jacobson, not Rabbi Y.Y. Rubenstein was this, but Rabbi Y.Y. Jacobson, who I was listening to the classes about Emunah, and that's a lot of the material that I've been sharing with you. he said that he shared over this idea of there was a boy who had some questions, and he was in his school and he was asking questions, and he had a really good question actually about the idea of the Jewish people being the chosen people, which, like, if you think about it for a second, it's a good question, right? Talking about what does it mean to be chosen, and is it fair, and how are we chosen, and what great question. And his teacher told him in this school that, you know, Jewish people don't ask those questions. And then he went and asked the person above his teacher, and they said, you know, those aren't the questions we ask. And he asked 5 different people in the school, and they all told him off for asking the questions. And I know that so many people have these sort of experiences, whether it was in Cheder, whether it was in school, whether it was with family members, of being told, you know, don't ask these questions. And that he came home and he'd had enough. And he said to his father, he's like, that's it, I'm through with it. Nobody can, you know, he said, when I had the question originally, so I thought it was a good question, but when they can't answer it, it just makes you think, like, then there's obviously no answer to the question, or these people are just not open-minded enough to have a discussion about it. And his father said to him, will you just go to one more person? You can imagine him going, really? Like, I've already asked 5 people, really? So he came to Rabbi Jacobson. And Rabbi Jacobson said, first of all, he gave this boy a hug, right? That's what he needed. And then he said to him, what's the second thing? What did he say to him? What a great question. That's all he needed. Yeah. What a great question. You can see when a teacher doesn't know how to interact well with a class, then they criticize the question, or it makes them feel wobbly, right? I can't tell you how often people ask me questions. I have no idea. It's quite a scary thing to say, I don't know. And sometimes they're quite basic things that I really should know. Or sometimes it's almost like I'm not quite sure and I don't want to say the wrong thing. It's okay. Great question. Let me find out, quickly write it down, right? Let's find out what it's about.
What do you do? Ask the question and you don't like the answer.
Then ask someone else. No, really. Keep asking till you get an answer you like.
It's like
Honestly.
asking a Shiloh.
Yeah, yeah. No, so that you have to be careful about. No, really. So if you ask a halachic question, you need to know. If you ask a halachic, I'll tell you what, it does actually come up a lot with avelut. Yeah, with the laws of mourning. There's some people who are very strict about the laws of mourning, and there's some people less so. You need to know who you're going to ask. If you're going to ask someone, you can't go to ask a halachic question and then say, oh, I don't like that. You can't go shopping for rabbis like that. That's not allowed, right? If you've asked your question and you told this is what you have to do, you have to stick to it. And I know people see that with siblings even, right? You'll ask different rabbis and they'll give you different thoughts on what the right thing you need to do is. But you've got to stick to your rabbi in terms of that. But this isn't what Lawrence is talking about. Lawrence is talking about a philosophical question. If you've got a question and you don't like the answer someone gave you, sometimes I know when I answer questions, sometimes I'll answer a question and I'll be like, no, I didn't really answer that very well. I'm not comfortable with the answer. It's better to say I don't know, right? That was our big thing, say I don't know.
But I'm also thinking about the person who asks the question, doesn't like the answer and leaves and just rejects everything.
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah. And it's, I mean, it happens in the Gemara even. Yeah. Yeah.
Or it was impossible for them to get like. I know it's terrible, but you know, say a mother loses a child, and you ask the question, why my child?
Yeah.
You're not going to get the answer to that.
No.
That is satisfactory to the mother.
And I think that the person, if the person is wise, who they're asking the question to, they shouldn't be giving an answer because God only knows.
Yes.
And actually giving an answer can be more harmful than just saying, I'm so sorry and I don't know. You know, so I think, I mean, even if you think about after the Holocaust, people who say the reason this happened, for sure not to survivors, but to any of us, it's not helpful to say, really, you know why God did kill, allow 6 million of our brothers and sisters to be killed? Of course we don't know. So I think that saying an answer when you don't know the answer is more destructive than just saying, I'm so sorry and I don't know.
Also, the answer is on the spot.
Right.
That's a bit.
Right. And then the guilt, you think, so what if I would have done all those mitzvot, then that bad thing wouldn't have happened. Or if I would have prayed more, or if I would have, I think it was Rabbi YY shared a story. There was a couple, I think it was from him, a couple who were struggling with fertility and they really wanted to have children. And people like sharing the idea of do a segula, right? If people come across this concept, do a segula, do something. You know, a red string is an example of a segula. Wear a red string and everything's going to be fine. Or do different things. What's that? Superstition. So I'm not knocking them because some of them have real value to it. But you have people who run from one segula to another. And what this couple were experiencing were people were saying them, you should try this and you should try, and like, for goodness sake, you know, try this and try this and try this. So they told him a story. They said that there was a story that there was a chicken farmer who had a whole big, you know, yard full of chickens, and the fox came and ate 100 of his chickens. So, you know, he had a massive farm, and he goes to the Rebbe and he says to the Rebbe, you know, what should I do? The fox came and ate the chicken. So he said, you know what? Did you make potato kugel for Shabbos? Yes, I made potato kugel for Shabbos. Cut it up into little pieces and feed that to the chickens, and then the chickens will be safe. And sure enough, he does that. And the next night, the fox comes along and eats another chicken. So he runs to the Rebbe and he says, I tried the potato kugel and it didn't work. So he says to him, oh, you know what? Try this different segula, give the chickens chulun, and again and again. And then eventually he comes back to the Rebbe and he's like, Rebbe, it's not working. You know, how many segulas are there? So he said to him, it depends, how many chickens are you willing to lose? Like, you know, like, and that's what I'm saying. I'm not knocking. There's so many things. There's real strength in a lot of the things we do. You know, even like the red string, if it's a real Kabbalist, not from someone selling it to you at the kotel because they're trying to get your money, yeah. But if it's coming from a real thing, I'm not knocking that. Segulas have real strength to them, but use your brain a little bit as well. But I think that's the thing, is to say to someone, do more mitzvah or do more things, but it can't be, if you do this, then this will happen. If you say all this to Tehillim, you know, has anyone ever got that? Pass this on to 10 people. If you don't pass it on, if you break the chain, really, if you don't pass it on to 10 friends, like, for goodness sake. But I'm not, of course everyone should pray. You know, if you get a message like that, so stop and say a paragraph to Tehillim, like say a prayer, say a chapter, say whatever it is. And if you want to pass it on to 10 of your friends and it's someone you know and you want them to join, wonderful. You know, like we say at Seder night, Harei them a Shabbat. That's even more praiseworthy. But let's use our sefer a little bit as well. Did someone else have their hands up? Yes.
I just thought maybe you would.
Excellent. I knew Leslie would come in with some wisdom. Just feed the kugel to the fox, then it's all sorted out. So or build a fence. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Put a bit of chicken wire on top.
There is something that.
Yeah.
And you were saying about how we do things, because it goes back to tradition. And when we sit at the Seder table, it's because we're telling the story of, we're here because they were there and we're there at the Seder table. And I was in Shul and over Yom Tov, and we were waiting, the Kohanim had gone up to Duchen, and they finished the Duchening. And while they were Duchening, I was thinking, isn't it incredible that there is an unbroken line of Kohanim that go all the way back to the Kohen Hagadol, and it's an unbroken chain of male son after male son after male son, and there they are giving us the priestly blessing. And I just thought that was as incredible as us sitting, us being here and able to do the Seder service.
That's beautiful. I love that idea. But you know, you look at the duchening over there, it's true, and they've done this for generation after generation after generation, going all the way back to the original Cohen, which was Aaron. You know, when we're talking about Moses splitting the sea, like his brother was that original Kohen. So we know we've got this line that we all come from, you know, the Jews that left Egypt, but this is like, and there's a gene, like you can test for it, right? It exists. They have the same DNA. We know that Kohanim come from this incredibly strong line. It's amazing. Thank you, Nicole. That's beautiful. Okay, I'm going to end with just one last idea in terms of asking questions, because then next time we're going to go on to something else. So there's the Bnei Yisachar, who was a great Hasidic master. His name was Tzvi Elimelech Spira of Dinov. Shapira. He lived in 1783 to 1841, and he comes and he talks about he actually writes this as a commentary on a different Hasidic master who's talking about the importance of that you shouldn't ask questions, and he said this guy's got it wrong. But the way he explains it is he says that when the Jewish people left Egypt, and then they go through the desert and they start complaining, one of the things they say is Hayesh Elokim b'kirbeinu im ayin. Is God amongst us or not? Right? And they're punished for that. That's a sin. To have just gone through the 10 plagues, been taken out of Egypt, splitting of the sea, and then suddenly to say, where's God? I don't know if I believe in him. That's a really big sin. But for people like us who haven't seen the sea split and we haven't seen open miracles, to ask questions about God, and to ask them as real, genuine questions that we're trying to find out. He says that's you know, a normal thing to do. Not only normal, but that's a praiseworthy thing to do. And the illustration he gives of this is, imagine if Abraham, the first Jew, right? We know this, the Medrash, it's not actually written in the Torah, but we've all grown up with the Medrash, this idea that he comes into his father's idol worshipping shop, right? And he comes into his idol worshipping shop with Terach, and he comes up to him and he goes to him, he says, what are all these things? And Terach says, well, these are our gods. This is what looks after us. This gives us money, and this gives us health, and this gives us strength, and and Avram goes, really, it looks like a piece of granite to me. But really, that's what happens. Like, you imagine that Avram's asking these questions, and he says, you know, prove to me that these idols, that they have strength, that they can do anything, that they can actually create the world, that they can look after us, that they can take care of us. And Terach says to him, don't be ridiculous, don't ask questions, right? You just have to believe, you just have to follow, you just have to know that this is what we do, this is our family business. Like, this was his shop, right? This was what he does. Questions are ridiculous, don't ask the questions, right? Imagine that would have happened, and imagine Avram would have said, okay, Daddy, you're right, no problem. You know, what would have happened to the Jewish people? We wouldn't be. So the idea of asking questions goes right the way back to the first idea of being a Jew. If Abraham would have just said, oh, really? That's so interesting, this really interesting looking structure there. That's where my health comes from. I didn't realize. Okay, that makes perfect sense to me. And this one over here, that's where all our money comes. Okay, I get it. So that's what's going to pay for me to go through university then, is it? You know, that structure over there. And Avram would have just said, and his father said, stop asking questions. Okay, Daddy, fine. Part of what makes us Jews is the fact that we ask those questions. That's who the Jewish people are, right? We have to ask the questions. We shouldn't be afraid of those questions. If we don't get an answer that we like, keep on asking, you know? And it's not to say that there's always going to be an answer. And I'm going to end with this. Some of the, I think Elchanan shared a Mincha Marav on one of the days of Yom Tov. So I don't know if anyone was here, but he gave a whole shir about the 5th cup, which is actually now called Elijah's cup. But there's 4 expressions of going out of Egypt. The 5th one, which is the Heveti, which means I will take you to the land of Israel. There's a whole debate about whether we should drink that cup, whether we shouldn't drink that cup. And what people don't realize is the reason it's then called the cup of Elijah is because that cup itself is going to be answered by Elijah. So it's not that it's called the cup of Elijah. We all think because Elijah comes along and drinks from the cup, and my dad always shook the table so it looked like someone's drinking it. And then we're like, yes, Dad, okay. We're like, you know, we're teenagers, we can see shaking it, and then we're older. Now the grandchildren like to see him shaking the table. But actually the idea that there are some questions that you can't get answers for. And we have to be able to sit with that. And we have to be able to be okay, you can't always get the answers. Does that mean that we should stop asking questions? Right? We wouldn't be Jews if we didn't keep asking the questions. Well, you know, like that, what they say about 2 Jews, 3 opinions, right? We've got to keep debating and asking and challenging and sharing. And what's interesting is one of the commentators actually shares the idea that even if you don't have questions, you should try find questions. And any of us who are teachers will know that the kids that learn the most are the ones that ask the questions. I remember when Reuben was very little, when he was 2, everything was why. Oh my goodness, why? And he'd explain that why. But he's a scientist, you can see it, and he loves to learn. And if anyone ever says to a child, stop asking questions, that's annoying, you kill the creativity in the child. And all of us have that child still in us. Keep asking those questions. You know, I always say when our kids somehow have this radar when they've got a really difficult question, for some reason, they'll always wait till Elchonan's out of the house. I'm like, seriously, like on a like really complex Judaism, whatever. I'm like if you just ask Abba, he's always got an answer. But they always ask me. I'm like, really? Like he's the one who's gone through 11 years of yeshiva. Could you just ask Abba? But I think it's this idea of just ask those questions. The more that we ask the questions, that's how we learn. And we're never too old to learn. Just keep asking questions. Thank you everyone for being with us here today. Enjoy the rest of your day off. Let me know if you've got any good ideas for what we should do. And see you next week, please, guys.